Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guest is David Goode. David, how are you doing?
Good.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you for making this a headphone-free episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. It's a rare treat.
I didn't want it to put a cramp in my good hair day.
Yeah. You and Heather Heron, when Heather was on, she was going on air right after we recorded, so she asked that we not wear the headset. So you were in good company with Heather.
She's a good one.
So you are kind of elusive to the Asher Marketing Podcast. We've been doing this for 4 years, and you're finally here. You're finally here.
Started last week.
You need to get around the office more.
How about that?
Speaking of that, you do get around the office. One of the things I want to talk about is the fact that you work with legitimately almost every Asher client. Is that true?
It sure seems like a lot of them, yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of meetings.
And the distinction I'll make, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but I work on a set number of accounts, but there's accounts I know nothing about, right? They're well handled and probably better handled by another team of people, but because of your role, you're probably involved in 90 to 95% of them.
A significant part of that, and some of that's strategy, some of that's different aspects of web and SEO, some of that's digital media. So with a lot of knowledge comes a lot of opportunity to help clients. Yeah,
well, especially the fact that you have, and this is what I'll use as a jumping off point to talk about your background, but you have a background in traditional media, but more recently have become expert in digital media. And as it turns out, clients want to know about both of those things.
Correct, yeah.
So your career pivot happened, about 8 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I had a midlife crisis, which is somewhat, true.
Yeah.
I was approaching my 40th birthday, and a point in my first career where I was like, I don't know that I want to do this, when I'm 50 or 60 or, how long can I do it? So to give some background, my first career was radio.
And is that something that you, when you were young, is that what you aspired to? Did you know you wanted to do that, or was it kind of an accident that you ended up in that path?
Definitely an accident.
Okay.
I didn't realize there was probably some things in my childhood that was more of a foreshadow.
Yeah.
I always thought I wanted to go into business. I just wanted to own a business, run a business. Okay. Probably because of my parents' background in accounting and being involved in businesses and things like that.
Okay.
My first week of college.
And this is in Illinois, correct?
Correct, at Southern Illinois University. I was told, hey, you can go up to the student center, and on the fourth floor of the student center is the student-run radio station, and just tell them you want to be on the air, and they'll put you on the air.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool to be on the radio. So I did that. And like 4 days later, I was on the air from 2 to 4 in the morning on a Saturday night, Sunday morning.
So are you playing music?
Yeah, we were playing. Okay. It was, a lot of college stations will play alternative music. And so it was playing just random stuff. They had an entire room full of records. So we were playing stuff off vinyl, and it was pretty cool. And it was stuff from, 80s and 90s. Yeah. And stuff of, bands that made it huge. And it became,
you're kind of a mini celebrity on campus when you're in that role. Kind of people know you.
No, actually nobody listened.
Well, it's 2 to 4 in the morning, I guess.
It was 2 to 4 in the morning.
A mini celebrity.
This was like, it was a real radio station. It was a well-known station that had been around for a lot of years.
Okay.
It was what we call cable FM, which means you could get it on a TV station through the campus cable.
Interesting.
It didn't have actually like a real transmitter.
Really? Okay.
So
is it more of a training ground?
You could hook the cable up to a radio and get it that way.
Huh.
Most people didn't want to go through all that effort.
Yeah, I can see why.
So yeah, it really was a training ground. There's a ton of people that came through that program and went on to and still do run some pretty significant radio stations throughout the country.
Wow. So you're doing this kind of on a whim, but you find out you like it.
Yeah, I went to Southern Illinois University as a business major.
Okay.
And halfway through, decided that I wanted to do radio TV. It happened to be that Southern Illinois University was the number 3 radio TV school in the country.
Oh, wow.
So behind UCLA and Syracuse.
So if you're going to have a whim, that's a good place to have a whim.
Right. Yeah. And it became something where after the first year, I was so involved in that student-run radio station that I ran the radio station for the remaining 3 years of my college career.
So this might sound obvious to you. The answer to this question might sound obvious to you, but what was appealing about it? What did you like about it?
I always probably wanted to be the center of attention, but I was really shy. Ooh. So in radio, you can entertain people while you're in a room by yourself. Yeah. You don't see all the people on TV. There's, everybody's looking. Everybody's watching. Yeah. On radio, you're kind of behind a microphone and there's nobody else.
So there's some anonymity, but you get to be the star of the show. Interesting.
Yeah. And, at 2 a.m, nobody cares if you're an idiot. But eventually I eventually hosted the morning show on the student-run radio station. Eventually, started working part-time at the real radio stations in Carbondale, Illinois, and moved on from there.
So talk about some of those, if you don't mind, some of those first professional post-college experiences. Was it, were you doing news? Were you doing music? Were you doing a combination of things?
Yeah, I started doing, I was like the nighttime DJ for a radio station up in Lansing, Michigan. Yep. I did that for a few years, then worked my way, kind of up into, afternoons or more prominent positions. For most of my radio career, I spent as a program director. So I was in charge of the overall brand of the radio station. Okay. And that extended to websites and email marketing and social media when that became a thing. And so it really kind of led to a lot of the skills that I needed for digital marketing. So
this is what, correct me if I'm wrong, but that your move to Michigan was a job opportunity.
Yeah, correct? I got a job in radio about 3 weeks before I graduated college.
Okay. All right.
So the day after the graduation ceremony, I was moving up, to Michigan. Yeah.
So before the digital, were the digital marketing aspects, they weren't there right from the start, right? That kind of evolved over time, or am I wrong? Were they there right from the beginning of your career?
The aspects that led to digital marketing were there. Okay. Digital marketing itself was, I had my first email account in college. I would go to the, library to get on the computer lab and go on AOL and, look at the internet for the first time. So it was all pretty new back then.
Yeah. Yeah. It existed, but not anything like the form it is in today. So that's, and correct me if this is wrong, but when you're starting your career, I don't want to use the word volatile, but there's a lot of change happening in radio, correct? With mergers and acquisitions and all of that. So you're navigating that. It's a new career. And then digital starts to have more of an impact. Is it something that you identified and said, I need to understand this because it's going to change my career? Or was it, this is interesting to me? Or was it, I really don't like that, I don't think the third is true, but I really don't like this is happening, but I kind of have to figure it out? Where were you in that continuum?
It just became part of the job, right? As you're communicating on air, you also have to communicate off air. And that became, first it was at events, at a live broadcast, at a spot around town, and then it became through emails and through the website, and eventually it became social media. So the job went more and more in that direction.
Yeah,
and how we communicate, and that would change through each different channel.
Okay. So along the way, at some point, if your LinkedIn profile is correct, you also did some work in minor league baseball.
That's actually a different David Goode. I'm just kidding. That's correct.
So was that related to your radio career, or was it a pivot?
It was. So I was working in Traverse City at the time.
Great
in Michigan.
place. Love Traverse City.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I was working at a radio station that was literally on Grand Traverse Bay.
Oh, wow.
We had a 300-foot dock into the bay.
We don't have that
great.
here at Asher.
we do not. The views were amazing.
Yeah.
They like to say up there, a view of the bay for half the pay. Because it just wasn't. It was radio in the first place. Doesn't pay that well.
Yeah.
But being up there didn't pay great. You had a great quality
Smaller
of life.
market. Yeah.
But the radio station had a great partnership with a minor league baseball team, Frontier League baseball team, and I had them on my show, my morning show. I hosted a morning show at the time, and they would come on and talk about the season and the games and everything. Eventually, we started broadcasting the games on the station that I worked for, and was invited to fill in and then just take over as the on-field MC.
So you no longer have that anonymity. People can see you, and sometimes thousands of people can see you.
Right. But it allowed me to kind of be silly, though.
Yeah.
The on-field MC would run the games in between innings.
Yeah.
So as the teams are changing, we would go and
the bat spin.
Exactly.
And the hot dog race, all of the condiment race.
Most of the people playing games would be a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So it was parents enjoying watching their kids be silly or get dizzy with the bat race or whatever. And it was a lot of fun. I got to go to 60 baseball games that summer. It was great.
Yeah. So you're doing that, you're enjoying it, but at some point you say, I'm going to double down on the digital media side, and the radio piece is going to kind of fade into the background. And I say that because you still did. Are you still doing anything on the radio side? I know you were at one point.
I still do some traffic reporting as a fill-in.
All right.
Gets it out of my system.
Okay.
Reminds me why I'm in digital marketing and not in radio full-time.
So it went from 90% radio to maybe 10% digital to flipping that.
Yes.
What precipitated that change, and what was it like making that pivot?
Yeah, it was a difficult pivot, to be honest. What precipitated that change, I had moved more and more into a digital role. I was a digital director at the radio stations here in Fort Wayne that I worked for. And then ultimately kind of had this moment one day where, I was less content with the role at the time. Not there was anything wrong with the digital part of the role, just was kind of getting to that point where maybe it's time to change careers. And then I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know that I want to do this 20 years from now. Or, at some point you start to get too old to relate to, a 18-year-old, 25-year-old on the radio. I can't be 70 years old and be like, hey, here's the new one from Grandma Taylor Swift. Because she would age too.
Yeah. Thanks for putting the bow on that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you were following along. Sometimes I have to explain myself on the radio. So, no, I just got to a point where I was thinking to myself, I don't see myself doing this.
Sure.
And that would mean my life hadn't really progressed at all from, over that next span.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of approaching 40. I think it was kind of a midlife crisis kind of thing. And I started looking for opportunities for the next step. And everything I was doing was more digital at the time. And I really enjoyed it. Over the course of the second half of my career, as social media became a thing, I started taking radio stations viral on social media. Everything we do really corresponds to communication and audience and a brand. And so it made logical sense to me to move into marketing. I think what I didn't expect was having to convince people that radio was marketing too. Radio is something you turn on for music, your escape while you're driving. It's puts you in a good mood. Maybe somebody on the radio, probably that hosted a morning show and maybe on a podcast at this very second, made you laugh. But no, I mean, it was not what people expect to be marketing. But there's the other side of it of, you put a commercial on the radio and you're marketing someone's business and driving and you're communicating to an audience. All that really correlated well to what we do in digital marketing. And so it was trying to convince people over time that my experience wasn't radio experience, it was marketing experience.
Interesting, yeah.
So I did a lot of networking. Did a lot of, LinkedIn connections. I did a lot of, at the time there was a great marketing breakfast that focused a lot on social media. I networked with a lot of people there, made some great connections, and ended up, speaking at that several times. And eventually somebody in that audience became my next boss.
Okay.
And gave me the chance.
Well, and that's, one of the things I hope people who aspire to careers in marketing or listen to this podcast are looking to make a pivot. You will get lucky someday and someone will take a chance on you. It happened to me. It happened to you. It requires a lot of patience when you're in that position, but it does happen. So you in that first role, you worked with friend of the podcast, Brian Engelhardt, Nick Hulting, who I ran into at the grocery store the other day.
Did you?
And some good folks.
Is he still eating healthy?
He looks the same, which is sad because I don't as the last time I saw him. But yes, it was really good to see him. So you had some great people to work with. So why did what precipitated you coming to Asher about 7 years ago? I know that I was, as I am with most things at Asher, mostly uninvolved, but somewhat involved. How did that happen? Did you know someone here or was it just responding to an ad?
So, much like the radio industry, where most of my job changes occurred through outside forces, meaning, like you said, with radio, mergers and acquisitions or budget cuts, things like that. That's what happened in my previous agency role. So it was, with the agency world, sometimes you lose a big client and sometimes you gain a big client.
Knock on wood, by the way.
Right, So when that happened, I believe somebody picked up the phone and called you and said, hey, I got somebody here that would...
I think it might have been Nick, actually.
Thanks, would
Nick.
be a good opportunity. Yes, thanks. And 2 days later, I was here having conversations about, my experience and the needs here. And it just so happened there was, an area of the business that was really expanding very quickly.
Yeah, and you came at a great time, and your being here has led to a lot of growth because we were, I would say up until you got here, we were still kind of figuring it out. How do you integrate a sizable digital team into a team that is already really strong? I would say that we were doing well with digital, but more dabbling in it. We were figuring it out, right? And I think that's true for most agencies at that time, but we had a lot of stops and starts staff-wise and not a lot of continuity. And for you to be here 7 years, I think you've outlasted the rest of the digital team that precipitated you've outlasted all of them combined. So tell us a little bit about your role at Asher, because that's even evolved, where now you are I'm going to look at my notes to get this right, Director of Integrated Media. What does that mean? How do you explain that to people?
It means I am integrating the media.
You're directing the integration of the media.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
So, as you said, things have really evolved over the last 7 years and before. When the digital media team started here, it was, hey, can we run some ads on Facebook or run some ads on the internet, right? And
or we want
now
to do
it's
some
gotten
paid search.
A lot more sophisticated. We have experts in different channels, and they really understand, what they're doing. At the same time, we have a really fantastic traditional media team.
Yep.
They've been doing it a long time. They understand broadcast, radio, TV, direct mail, billboards. But the departments were really always separate. And so the goal is to really integrate them and make sure from a strategy perspective that we are bringing those conversations together early in the process, that we're making sure that, broadcast TV and streaming TV are working together, and that radio and streaming audio are working together, and Facebook and everything. And so that allows us to be really cohesive with a strategy and to produce better results and be more efficient with the work and the strategy and tracking that we're doing for our clients.
Well, and that's, I think you got right to the heart of it. The other thing too is those lines are blurring a little bit. When someone today says, I watch TV, that could be broadcast, that could be cable, but it could be YouTube, it could be Hulu, it could be something else.
Right.
So it's almost meeting clients and consumers where they are. It's like you don't really care how you consume the content. We just want to make sure that we're putting you in front of the right audience, regardless of what medium that is.
Right. And that's part of our strategy when we're working on a project is where are they? Where is the audience? How do we reach them properly? And that's how we kind of decide on what channels to be in front of, is where can we best find them.
Well, and it's genuinely one of the things I like about working here is that when I am working with a client, I know that we don't have a bias toward a specific medium. It's like we do it all, so we're going to put you in what we believe are the top priorities, not what's going to drive the most revenue. And that is, I think, a huge advantage for me trying to convince clients that, no, this is genuinely the right choice based on what the experts are telling us.
Yeah, we don't get paid anymore if we're choosing TV or radio or Facebook or LinkedIn. I mean, it's what's going to drive results, because ultimately growing your business as a client is way more important to us, and that's how we're going to grow.
So you're working with a ton of clients, many of whom are in different industries. How are you keeping pace from a learning standpoint?
That's one of the bigger challenges.
I laugh because I know there's no easy answer to that other than work a lot of hours. But.
Yeah, I mean, throughout my career, everything was always changing. Even when I was in radio, things were becoming digital.
Yeah.
As with digital, it would always change. I've hosted a podcast at one point that talked about digital trends and updates. And that really helped me develop a lot of sources for where I can find, trending information, news that, much like the rest of the news cycle used to be on a weekly basis and then a daily basis. And now it's, 175 times a day, there's new information. It not only changes, but each channel changes. There's updates, like Google will update their search product, or LinkedIn will offer a new feature. And now that you add AI into the mix, and AI is growing like crazy in terms of its capability, the ability to improve on tactics and strategy and getting results is changing daily too. So it's not easy to keep up on, but that's part of our role and part of what we need to do to serve clients. Yeah,
it's one of the things I know that Asher, I think, has always done this well. I'm obviously biased, but I think when we look to hire people, we look for, number one, a disposition of service, people who want to help. And I think we've got that across the board. And as part of that, people who like to educate, to help clients understand and their coworkers understand. I know I look to you probably too often for, hey, we have a lunch and learn coming up. Got a topic? Because I know that there's going to be something new that you're in front of that's probably going to be more interesting than some of the things I could trot out that are a little bit more tried and true.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant process. We in team meetings talk about trends and news and, kind of have a discussion around how that could affect campaigns in the future. As an example, for anybody running a Google search campaign, you understand that you target based on keywords, what somebody's going to type into Google, and that's what you want to show an ad for. In the future, Google has said they're going to basically take away keywords, which is how Google search campaigns have always worked, right? It's going to be focused more on intent and context, and they're trying to understand what you're looking for, regardless of what you typed in.
Or even if you typed it in.
Right, because there's voice stuff
search,
and AI now.
Yeah, I spend hours a day yelling at the device in my kitchen, different commands, Yeah,
I have Alexa too.
I have Google Home, which works for me, but I would love to try other devices because it's a little quirky sometimes, but yeah. So you're not doing this alone. Let's talk a little bit about the teams you work with. What is your role and how do you delegate or collaborate with others on the team?
So as the director of integrated marketing, I'm working with both the traditional and digital media teams, but I manage day-to-day the digital media team. So we work together on projects anywhere from early on in developing strategy and an audience to launching and executing campaigns, managing them and reporting. And so we have, like I said earlier, we have teams full of experts. So one of our team members is a whiz at Google and, spent part of the day earlier today, in a education session with other teammates about, how can we manage these campaigns better? How can we get them to perform that extra 10%? And so other people come in and have, great backgrounds in social media ads, so Facebook and Instagram or LinkedIn and lead generation and e-commerce. And so depending on the client and the project, we'll bring somebody in whose expertise best fits that client.
So you can kind of divide and conquer in terms of the different platforms and different tactics.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite thing about your work at Asher and what's the biggest challenge?
Favorite thing is really getting to work on a bunch of clients. That's something that I always liked in radio too, is you get to, you would get to work with a bunch of different advertisers. And it's not like you could go to work for one company and one brand, but you're only dealing with that brand if you worked for that specific retailer or, franchise. But here at Asher, I get to work with companies in all different categories.
I've always appreciated that too. Prior to this job, I worked for a law firm, and I remember I was only there 10 months, but on day 2, I was like, wow, this is always going to be, sorry, no offense to the law firms out there, but I was like, this is always going to be about lawyers.
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't have the attention span for that.
Well, I don't know how you don't. I mean, Law and Order you can watch a different,
very different
franchise
than the type
of Law and
I was
Order.
Involved in. No, but that variety, I think it's great from a learning standpoint. You still have to do a depth of work, but it's a challenge, but it's a different kind of challenge.
But you're right. I love learning about new industries. I never in my life, thought I would learn about different government organizations or microelectronics or, coffee, coffee franchises. But at the same time, we've become experts in some of those fields. Like we know a lot about higher education and how to market and drive student enrollment. We know a lot about healthcare and franchise marketing on a local level. So that has been fun. I mean, ultimately, I love learning about that stuff. I love learning even on the operations side that we aren't necessarily, involved in operations of a restaurant, but understanding that so that you can market it better and understand customer experience and things like that. That's been fun. I love that stuff.
Yeah. So what's the biggest challenge? Is it keeping up?
Answering this question. I think the biggest challenge that I find is one, that it's always changing. So it is what you knew before and the solution you had 6 months ago may not be the right solution 6 months from now. And making sure that it's okay to admit that and say, hey, we need to pivot here. And we've done that with clients before when it makes sense.
Yeah, it was right at the time, but it's not the right answer anymore.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is it's a challenge to show attribution for campaigns at times because the goal line's always moving in digital. In digital, you have things like privacy concerns. Mm-hmm. So information doesn't always pass from point A to point B to point C.
Yep.
So sometimes you have to break that process down and, get from point A to point B and say, okay, well, we made it there. How do we get from B to C?
Yep.
And be able to show this campaign is driving awareness. This campaign is getting people to consider your business, and ultimately, it's driving your sales and driving results.
Yeah, so it's a challenge, but there's some fun in the problem solving, I guess.
Some days, yeah.
You just wish there were fewer problems. Yeah. Okay, so let's pivot to a few quick hit questions. You've made a considerable pivot yourself in your career. You've done a lot of different things. What's your best career advice? What's something you've learned that you think other people should know about building a fulfilling and successful career?
I think when it comes to, if you're not happy where you are, you can change that situation. It might take work. It might take some convincing of other people. I never thought I was going to be in radio, and then I was in radio. I never thought I was going to be in digital marketing, and here I am managing the team. But at the same time, it wasn't always an easy path. I had to convince, just same way we have to convince a client, this is the right strategy for you, this is going to get you results. Yep. Sometimes I had to convince people along the way that not only was did I have the skills and expertise, but I was the right person. Yeah,
well, and better that you put in the effort and you're able to tell yourself, I took control of my own destiny, then you wake up 30 years later and say, boy, I hated the last half of my career.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, you can always go back.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to change careers, you never know what the other choice is or how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
You can regret you never took the choice, but if you didn't take it, you don't know how it's going to work out. So if it doesn't work out, you can always pivot back, or you can always pivot to something new.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Okay. So what is a myth or misconception about your work that you would like to debunk? That could be the world of working at an agency. It could be Asher. It could be the world of digital marketing. It could be the world of traditional marketing. What's something that people think that ain't quite so?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is around social media advertising. People think that it's an easy thing to do.
It's fun.
But in reality, it's like, look, we can all post on Facebook or TikTok or whatever
What's so
channel
hard
is.
about it? Yeah.
But and they make it really easy to spend money on their platform.
Yeah.
There's a little button that says Boost Post, and you can click that button and you can spend money. And then at the end of your $500 you spent, you realize that some of that targeted San Francisco and you're in Denver.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. They make it easy to spend money, but it's a lot more complex. And understanding how their algorithm works, how targeting works, how the message is important, and then tracking results. It's a lot more complex. There's a lot of facets to what we do, and a lot of it looks easy.
Yeah, so the mechanics are easy, but the strategy is hard, and you have to know what you're doing.
All of it's hard.
Ergo the deep sigh. Okay, one last thing for you. In terms of tools that you use, things that help you get the job done, and you do a considerable lot, what is something, could be analog, could be digital, doesn't matter, but something that helps you get things done, be productive, be effective, that deserves a shout out?
My pad and my pen.
All right, tell me more about this mystical world of pads and pens.
So, ironically, as the guy that leads the digital media team, I do a lot of things not digital.
Okay.
I will write stuff down before I put it into a document. It allows me to commit it to memory a little bit better. I'll make a lot of checklists on paper, and while I've tried digital checklists, but I need the satisfaction of coloring in that checkbox on my to-do list. So I just find that in my process, a lot of the paper and pen kind of stuff works for me, for learning, for kind of thinking through what's the right strategy and kind of collecting notes, and then I'll put it into a digital form.
Well, I would imagine that some of it is once you log on to a computer, you're in a rabbit hole it's hard to get out of, because there's a million directions you could go, all of which have the potential to be productive, but collectively may be very unproductive if you're not thinking at the 10,000-foot level.
Well, the checklist, too, helps me stay on track, because the second you pull out your phone or you see a notification on your laptop in the corner that says you got an email or a Slack message.
That's always going to be more interesting than the hard thing you're working on.
You're suddenly not focused. So keeping that pen and paper with a checklist of to-do items helps me stay focused.
Yeah, that's really good advice, that if you are someone, I know Jenna here at Asher is very reliant on analog tools, and she's one of the most organized people I've ever met. I tend to have a bias towards digital tools, but maybe that's why I'm sometimes so disorganized. I have made it a practice that I always have paper with me to offload things that I need to think about later, but not now. It's like if I'm in flow and I say I'm going to dedicate half an hour to this task. I have a bad habit in the past of I dedicate 2 minutes and then it's like I think of something and I need to go look it up right now. And 4 hours later I'm on the Justin Bieber fan page. I don't know how I got there. All I know is I didn't get anything done for 4 hours. So this is a way to say now isn't the time. By going to paper, I can't go down a rabbit hole and then pivot back to the task at hand.
On the flip side, a tool that is not good for me, but still follows that same thought process of writing it down is the sticky note. Because I will have that same process of like, let me just jot this down and I'll deal with that, later on today. Then I have 38 sticky notes on my desk or my keyboard or my monitor. And yeah.
Well, and that's genuinely why I use like lined paper, is it becomes a list. And then when I get to a stopping point, I prioritize, okay, here are the things I thought about. What's the importance of these? I compare that to the to-do list I had prepared for the day. And it's kind of like, did any of these
never match?
They never match. But it's like, is there anything here that's more important than those? If not, pivot back to those, keep the running list. And then sometimes by the end of the day, I look at that list and I'm like, none of this is real. None of this really needs attention. But just by offloading it, it saves me a lot of time. So pen and paper, hurrah for pen and paper.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this. I learned some new things about you, despite the fact that we've worked together for 7 years. But we're usually talking about client stuff and not stuff like this.
What did you learn? What didn't you know before?
I didn't know. I think some of it's more what I forgot, because I did know how you got to be here at Asher, but I've forgotten it was Nick.
and you played a role in that.
I think I didn't know some of the aspects of your radio career.
Yeah. What's interesting to tie back to that, I started in radio because somebody said, hey, go up to the 4th floor. When I thought back to even before that, when I was a kid, when I was with friends, we would make these recordings of these little like adventures we would go on, and it was basically like a radio drama, like an audio kind of drama. I remember we would make sound effects and we would like shake a cookie sheet for thunder.
Do you still have those tapes?
I don't know that I do.
They were probably cassette tapes, right?
They were, and I think they got ruined in a storage unit flood. But basically, like we would make like the sound of a horse galloping. And stuff. I mean, it was pretty hilarious back then, but I never really thought about, hey, that was like, at that time, I didn't think that was going to be a career, but it was, and that led to this career.
Somewhere in your subconscious was that idea of playing with sounds and audio.
Yeah.
All right. And look where it's landed you today.
Right. Yeah.
See, listeners, great things can happen if
just make galloping noises with your mouth. And
start there if you don't know what to do. And maybe it will lead you to a career as got to look at my notes again because I always screw it up. Maybe it will lead you to a career as a director of integrated media. So how's that? Well, thank you, David. This has been very fun. And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then. Thank you for listening to the Asher Marketing Podcast. The Asher Marketing Podcast is a production of Asher Agency, a full-service agency for franchises and co-ops, colleges and universities, financial service companies, healthcare organizations, and government agencies. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.